So I know I'm going to go against the grain on this video. I've seen the reception to the episode. I know it's very positive. But I kind of had the opposite experience with the pilot episode to Knights of Guinevere. I normally would like to wait till the full series is out to review any sort of show. But the first episode, the pilot episode, was not what I expected. I actually had quite a few issues with it. And a lot of them stem from the fact that I think Glitch can do better. I've seen them do better. So I thought I would give a bit of a unscripted, unfiltered, just conversation about the first episode and just kind of run through everything I saw. First off, a positive point. I actually think the show looks good. Visually, I think you can stop at any frame and the frame itself will look nice. There's a lot of background details, characters are well designed, but it's the animation itself that I actually have some issues with. Now, I know the show is made in 2D animation, which is different from Glitch's other shows, which is digital. So maybe them trying to explore a new medium has shown some like bumps in the road type of thing, but some of the scenes, like specifically the frame rates of some of the scenes, are just very inconsistent. And I know they're an indie studio, so I don't want to go too hard into them on this, but I know they can do better. I've seen them do better in this very episode. There are some scenes that are animated very nicely, and then there are some scenes that are just odd. Like my eyes were picking up visual cues that something was off. Okay, so here's a very simple scene of the character Frankie simply getting up from her chair and walking forward. It's pretty standard, about 3 frames in between each bit of movement. Keyframes, in-betweens, I'm not sure what you would technically call these, but about 3 frames per bit of movement. And on its own, there's nothing really to critique about this. Maybe you could add a bit of extra, like another movement frame in between when she's walking to make it look a bit smoother. But other than that, this is fine on its own. My issue starts when you suddenly look at scenes like this, which are all of a sudden animated in 2 in-between frames per bit of movement. You can see the animation is a lot smoother, there's a lot more movement happening, and you can definitely notice it when I stand them beside each other like this. I don't know if everyone can notice it, but I can definitely see a difference between these scenes. The right one definitely looks a lot smoother, a lot more movement is happening, with the left, there's just some jankiness to it that my eyes can see. It's not bad. On its own, neither one of these would necessarily be bad. The problem is when you have these scenes only a few minutes apart from each other. I may not notice anything when I'm actually watching the episode, but in the back of my mind, my brain is telling me something is odd. And it's not the only odd thing about the animation as well. One thing I did notice when going through all these scenes was that no 2 objects or entities or characters, whatever you want to say, ever move at the same time. Even nicely animated scenes like this one I'm showing right now, you'll notice that the stick will go up in the air, it'll spin a bit, but none of the characters will move. Then the characters will move, and the stick won't move. It goes back and forth until the scene is done. I think the scene looks nice and it's animated nicely, but it's an odd thing about the animation that I noticed, and as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see why only one thing should be moving on screen at a time. Why not have 2 things moving, or even more? It just feels to me that it'd be more efficient to have multiple things moving at once. This clip I'm going to show you now is probably the best example of what I'm trying to say. You can see Frankie is just doing her work and she's loading things into a truck. But Frankie is animated in 3s, and the door is animated in 2s. That's already strange enough to me. I don't get why they can't be in the same frame rate. Even beyond that, look at what happens when the door starts closing. Frankie gets off the truck and she starts walking away, then she does this spin. But she stops midway, and the door fully closes, then she continues moving. I think this is the most clear example of what I'm saying when only one thing can be moving on screen at a time. Sure, maybe there's a reason behind why one thing moves at a time, but when you're having issues like this and characters are literally freezing mid-spin, that's a problem. I hope people can agree with me on that. That is a problem, that this character froze mid-spin and then continued moving. If you were going to disagree with me on every single thing I say in this video, you have to at least agree that this spin Frankie does looks strange. There is room for improvement in this scene at least. Another thing I like to mention is dialogue. The dialogue in the show is good for the most part, but there's a few lines that I found were worded a bit awkwardly. Maybe could have had some work done to them to just improve them slightly. For the most part, the voice acting itself was good. Sparky probably had some of the best voice work in the episode, as well as some of the best lines.
You were just going to sell her, man! To one of your nasty clients. This is a real chance for me.
To do what? Shine some shithead shoes in a fancy tower till you choke on the fumes? Know what some nasty client affords us? A second ship. Fast one, for you. Maybe even a third. That's a whole goddamn fleet with you as a captain. We both know the money ain't in scraps. It's in exotics.
However, he does also have some of the lines I'm referring to. Right after what he just said there, he then says this.
I love you for that hard-headed spirit, kiddo. I do, but I can't show you special treatment, especially because you're you.
It's the especially cause you're you part that I'm not too fond of. I would have just left it at, I can't show you special treatment, and then just moved on from there. I think it would have flowed a lot nicer if you just cut it off earlier. But there are other reasons I don't like this line as well, and I will get to them later. But for now, I would like to give a second example.
Frankie, when did you buy these? Emphasis on buy. Oh yeah, boombox. Should've known.
Same thing here. I would have just removed the section where she says emphasis on buy, and I think the line would have just flowed nicer. Both of these are really good examples of the idea that less is more. This next example, though, is a little more complicated than that.
Where tall tales became indisputable truths.
It's all for you, Olivia. Everyone who comes and goes will eventually be under your watchful care. Happy birthday, sweetheart. I hope this can make up for... I don't think I need to say it.
Now, the bit there I think that is really bad is when he says, I hope this can make up for... Well, I don't think I need to say it. Obviously, the writers are trying to foreshadow something with this girl. Personally, I think the girl's a fucking psychopath, and she probably murdered someone in the past. But they're obviously trying to insinuate that something tragic has happened to this girl, and she was brought to this planet, something along those lines. The reason I say it's more complicated is because it's not as simple as just remove that one section and then continue on. The whole monologue he gives to his daughter here is a bit clunky, in my opinion. I think to actually get across what they want to get across, but not sound so awkward, the whole thing would need to be rewritten. To give a half-assed attempt at what I mean, here's an example. It's all for you, Olivia. Soon the park and everyone within will be under your watchful care. Forget the past. Your future is as bright as the lights out there. You just need to embrace it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Happy birthday, my dear. I hope this makes things a little bit easier to get through. Now, some people will say I'm being pedantic about rewriting lines and stuff like this, and I am. I absolutely am. But I think there's many examples like this throughout the entire episode of just small but meaningful line changes that could happen to just make the episode better and just make the characters feel more alive, more relatable, or just easier to understand, or some variation of that. I think overall the script could have gone through at least like one, maybe two more redrafts just to make everything flow a little bit nicer. But this is just leading to an overall criticism I have of this episode, which is a lot of aspects of the writing and just the way things are shown on screen to us is sometimes very unclear or just is not explored enough. And these range from small issues to larger overall changes I would do to the writing in the episode. Let me start off with a small example, and I can work up to the more larger and generalized examples of what I mean by just unclear writing, dialogue, and editing. So, for example, editing, like I just said, there is this little clip at the beginning of the episode, and I'm going to just play it. It's pretty quick. And you just tell me what you think it is in the comments. Go down below and just tell me what you think happened in that clip. And then come back here.
Thank you.
Okay, so when I watched this the first couple times, I could not figure out why she said thank you at first. And I think the reason goes by pretty quickly. If you look closely when they zoom out, you can see that a young Frankie is actually fixing her finger. Once I noticed that, it was pretty obvious what was happening, but I think they zoom out so far and they make it go by so quickly that it's pretty easy to miss. And then because of that, the thank you line becomes pretty confusing to why she even said it. Now, obviously, I think this is a very minor issue, but it's a good example of what I mean by just the visuals on screen making it harder to understand what is happening. I just think they should have been zoomed in a little bit further, or maybe had Frankie pull out a little tool or something, just made it a bit clear to what she was doing in that moment, because I would not blame anyone for missing it. Okay, so now zooming out to the episode as a whole, I think the episode actually fails to give us a lot of information that I think we should have at this point to, get us invested in everything. I think a lot more of this episode should have been focused on the corporation and how everyday people have been affected by it and how people live in this world. Because while we see a lot of people complaining about how the corporation is bad, we don't actually know any good reasons to why they are bad or what they're doing to affect people. We can definitely assume some things. For example, Blue Lung. As far as I'm aware, they don't actually mention Blue Lung once in the whole episode. You do notice it mentioned in signs in the background, but no one actually says it out loud. And I think this would have been a really good thing to explore in the first episode, because it would give us a reason to be invested because it's people's health. People are dying from it. And there's a perfect spot to introduce it as well. Right at the beginning, where Annie is talking to that shop owner about getting parts, instead of parts, we could have had her there for medicine, or maybe a replacement for the gas mask we see her use later in the episode. And when the shop owner inevitably turns around and denies her what she wants, he can say something along the lines of, "Why would I ever sell to a crownie like you when you guys are responsible for running the factories that caused Blue Lung in the first place? In fact, I hope you get Blue Lung. It's what you deserve for being a corporate sellout." And then we can just have things proceed as normal with Annie giving her little rant. And then later we can see the guy who's actually suffering from the disease. And it would just add a nice little through line to why we should, as viewers, hate the park. Okay, let's go back to that line from Sparky that I mentioned before. The reason I don't like this line is because it implies a history between Sparky and Frankie. And up until this point, we don't know anything really about Sparky. The only thing we know is that he is Frankie's boss to some degree, but this line implies that there's more to it, like a history or something they have. So I have two interpretations. First interpretation is that the writers are trying to have some sort of like fatherly dynamic, like a parental figure for Frankie with Sparky. But if that was the case, I wish they had more in the episode to actually show that they get along, like a father-daughter type of thing. Like, show that Frankie actually cares for her in that sort of way. We don't really ever get that. The other interpretation is that Sparky just knows how Frankie is as a person. He knows she's hot-headed and that she's probably going to do something like this, so he anticipated it. And now he knows that I can't be soft with her because she's just going to continue to do it if I let it slide. If that was also the case, then I still say the same thing. They should have had something earlier in the episode to imply that Frankie, or that Sparky, knows what Frankie is like. Maybe, like, when they're putting the robot into the storage room, he can turn to Frankie and say, "And don't you get any funny ideas, because I know what you get like when the park's involved." Okay, so just some other small final things before I wrap it up here. So when Sparky is threatening Frankie and saying that you know what happens when you disobey, he pulls out these little vice grips, and you notice the end of the vice grips, they're actually teeth. And then they pan over to Frankie, and you know she's missing 2 teeth. This is kind of a cool detail, but it's just really silly. So I think it's cool that they are, in such a very subtle way, like without saying it, implying that Sparky pulled out Frankie's teeth in the past as punishment for some things. That's metal as fuck. I like that. But why have the teeth at the end of the vice grips or whatever they are? That's just a bit silly. That's a bit weird. Why not just have actual vice grips? Just, why teeth? Why have teeth at the end of them? It's strange. That's just a funny little thing. To be fair, she also could have lost her teeth by catching punches with her mouth, but we'll move on. So, in this elevator, you can see that Guinevere looks fine. Nothing's wrong with her. But then the next time we see her, she has her guts hanging out. You know, as far as I can tell, she looks fine here. So, I think you could have just, like, hit her torso a little more, and then we wouldn't have it. It's just an odd little funny thing, not a huge thing, just fun, something funny I noticed. And finally, to leave off on a positive note, I actually did like some of the characterization between Frankie and Andy. Frankie is obviously hinted at being the better mechanic or engineer of the two. We see that Andy is struggling with a lot of her experiments. She obviously ends up getting fired. But then we see Frankie with all these gizmos and gadgets, and she's just clearly better at it. This is probably another thing where I wish they explored that a bit more, to why Frankie is so good at this stuff. But if I had to guess, I think it's because Frankie is obviously the dreamer. She obviously has a passion for this thing, while Andy thinks of this as just more of a job. But also, is Frankie insane? Like, these one little guys here, these little robots, they obviously are clearly talking to her, but when we see them from Andy's perspective, they seem just like normal dolls. And this isn't the only time we see this as well. Frankie obviously sees Guinevere as this kind princess. But when Andy sees it, or we see it, we see the robot Guinevere is actually mangled and kind of gross looking. So in many aspects, Frankie is definitely the more passionate and has her head in the clouds type of thing. She obviously is looking to great things. So I think maybe later in one of the later episodes, we'll actually see that illusion, that make-believe world that she's living in, get broken. Okay, so that's about everything I have to say. Before I go though, I do want to make some things clear. I actually didn't plan on making this video. I had planned to release something else, not animation related. But when I saw the episode and then I saw people going, "Oh, Glitch has destroyed Disney. Oh, look, Glitch has totally ruined them." I was just... I don't agree. I don't agree this episode was as flawless as everyone is saying. I think there was a lot wrong with it, and the reception kind of surprised me because I don't think we should be giving this a pass as much as we should be. I think Glitch can do a lot better, and I think we should be holding them to a lot higher standards. So when I saw the reception and how much people were just glazing this episode, I thought I wanted to give my thoughts on it. I thought I wanted to be the opposite voice in the room, kind of saying, hey, I think Glitch can do better. I don't dislike this episode. I do plan on watching episode 2. I'm gonna be there. There's a lot I am interested in. I just think it could have been so much better. And I wish people would be a little more critical on what Glitch puts out instead of just giving them always a pass. Alright, that's everything. That's all I want to say. Thank you for watching. Next video should be on something that's not animation related. I actually have a horror game I want to talk about, because I do love horror. But for now, that's everything. Thank you so much. Take care, stay healthy, and thank you all so kindly for watching. The reception for my last video was great. I loved it. And it's only going to go up from here. So, take care. Thank you kindly again. Have a good night.